So good morning, and thank you for joining us today for an Eploy partner webinar on connecting applicant tracking with staff scheduling. And specifically, we're going to be looking at how this can benefit hospitality, retail and leisure businesses. I'm delighted to be joined on the webinar by Jamie Harvey from one of our marketplace partners, Rotaready. Rotaready have successfully created an integration that can securely move your candidates from Eploy into the Rotaready platform at the right time. Jamie's one of the co-founders of Rotaready, which is intelligent staff rota software that helps you schedule rotas, optimize your wage spend, record attendance, and approve timesheets for payroll. I'm now going to hand over to Jamie so that we can take a look at how the Rotaready and Eploy integration can benefit your hospitality, retail, or leisure business. Good morning, Jamie.
Lovely stuff. Hey, Bruce, and thank you for having me on. And thank you to everyone in the audience for joining in today. Whilst I attempt to share my screen, let me quickly introduce myself. So, yep, my name's Jamie. I'm one of the co-founders over here at Rotaready, and I lead our customer-facing teams. The idea for today will be for me to give you an overview as to what Rotaready is all about. I'll talk through the integration we have with Eploy's awesome platform and the benefits that the integration itself brings. Hopefully you can all see my screen by now. Bruce, give me a shout if you can't. I'm going to start off with some background into Rotaready and what we do in more detail. And I'll also give you a quick demo too, so you can see what it's about all for yourselves. So if you haven't heard of Rotaready before, in a nutshell, we do workforce management software for the hospitality, leisure and retail industries. The idea for Rotaready came about from a summer job I had when I was at university. I used to work at a theme park. If you're familiar with Southwest London, you might have come across Chesington World of Adventures. I was one of the guys trying to flog you a keyring or magnet or a photo when you came off the ride. I was in a team of about 50 people, and I remember really closely one day going into the manager's office to find them building next week's rota. They had sheets of paper all over the table, one piece of paper per person, which had the employee's profile. They were trying to figure out who had availability for a shift next week. Eventually, the rota got built, a big piece of A3 paper printed and put on the wall, and my colleagues and I would crowd around it, try to find the shifts that were working, make a note on our phones or bits of paper, only to come in the next day to find that the rota had been scribbled on to indicate changes. It was a bit of a mess, really. All the holiday requests and shift swaps were all based on paper forms, and we never really had any true confidence we were being paid accurately for the hours that we'd worked because we had no visibility of the times that we'd clocked in and out for. So with my friend from home, who's now my co-founder, we set out trying to build something to really improve that process. And we finished our degrees and we took jobs in the city and we worked on our projects on evenings and weekends before finally taking the plunge. If I move on to this slide to give you some stats, we grew the business organically before taking a round of seed investment in 2017, and we've grown pretty steadily from there. So hopefully some of the numbers on this page will give you a fair sense as to where we are. In terms of what we actually do, like I mentioned before, it's workforce management software for the hospitality, leisure and retail industries. So this means if you run a pub, a bar, a restaurant, a shop on the high street, a hotel, a cafe, a leisure attraction, or anything in between, you can use Rotaready for the following things. First and foremost, as our name Rotaready would suggest, Rotaready is brilliant for rota scheduling. So with Rotaready, you can build and share accurate rotas with your teams, but it's not just rotas. We also have time and attendance, which means clocking in and clocking out. That will drive all of your reporting, including your payroll, which either we can do for you, or you might choose to stick with your existing payroll solution. We also have a full suite of HR functionality too. So this means Rotaready will act as a repository for everyone's personal details, their employment records, their pay histories, their availabilities, their documents, their holiday entitlements, and so on. We then have demand forecasting, which means that Rotaready's machine learning and artificial intelligence will predict your demand for upcoming days and weeks, really to allow you to build rotas in a more accurate fashion, ultimately avoiding underspend and avoiding overspend too. We have an open API, which means we have loads of integrations available off the shelf. So we integrate with all the other platforms which you'll likely be using in your business, say your EPOS solution, maybe your payroll solution, perhaps your reservation system and your training platform too. And of course, the ATS side with Eploy as well, which I'll go into more detail in a few minutes' time. Now, they're not listed on this page, but everything I've just talked through is also underpinned by a really comprehensive set of cost control features, which really means you have visibility of your commercial performance metrics. So your forecast versus actual versus budget, sales, wages, hours being resourced, your labor ratio or wage percentage, and productivity metrics too, plus any custom metrics which you might follow in your business, and then mobile apps for your regular colleagues too, so everyone can stay in touch with when they're working and everything which they need to know. I'll jump into a demo in a moment's time so you can see exactly how everything comes together, but I quickly want to talk through exactly how the integration we have with Eploy works. In a nutshell, when you click to hire a candidate on Eploy, that colleague's profile will be created automatically in Rotaready by copying across all of their relevant details. And furthermore, if you have any downstream systems linked to Rotaready, such as maybe your payroll platform or maybe your comms platform, that colleague's profile will be created automatically in those downstream systems too. So the idea of the integration is it saves you from having to enter that colleague's details into Rotaready and perhaps other downstream systems too. There's a nice quote here from Anne-Marie Cervantes, who's head of people over at Gusto, which is a highly valued customer for both Eploy and Rotaready. They operate 13 lovely restaurants across the UK. And the way that the integration works in Gusto's case is much like I just mentioned. When Gusto click to hire a candidate on Eploy, that colleague's profile will be created automatically in Rotaready and subsequently in Gusto's payroll system, their comms platform, and their training platform too. Now, Anne-Marie makes a really important point here. The fact that integration works and the fact those profiles are created automatically, it means that the management team can focus on welcoming the colleague properly on their day one, rather than the actual administration and the faff of having to actually create and enter their profiles into the various systems. So hopefully the benefits of the integration are fairly clear, but I'll quickly talk you through them. Number one is time saving. So the fact that the integration automatically creates the colleague's profile into Rotaready and perhaps downstream systems too, saves you the time and the energy and the faff of having to do so manually. The second part here is accuracy. The colleague's profile or the details of that colleague's profile are copied from Eploy, meaning you don't have to worry about any fat finger errors or typos. And lastly, one source of truth. By integrating Rotaready with Eploy and perhaps your downstream systems as well, it means that the employee is always kept accurate throughout their life cycle. So if their details were to change, or if they were to be marked as a leaver, Rotaready can infer that to your downstream systems too. Okay, the main event. So I'm going to give you a quick demo to Rotaready. I'll try to keep this to 20, 25 minutes or so. I'll hopefully remember to mention again towards the end, but if you would like to get in touch to have a properly bespoke demo, please do, and we can set up something to go through a bit more thoroughly and diligently. So I'm going to attempt to switch onto my second screen. Hopefully you can all see that too. Okay, so this is a Rotaready environment. I've already logged into it, and it is based on a pretty dummy looking restaurant from the sounds of it. Your environment would of course be purpose built for you. Now, the first thing you'll see when logging into Rotaready is this platform. This is called Rotaready HQ, and this is typically aimed at area managers and above. It allows you to move between the sites for which you have access, but also to build some cross-site reports and tools, which I might show you again towards the end. I can see my sites listed in the main part of the page here. In this particular case, I can see 5 or 6 different restaurants, but each restaurant has its own login button. That's one way which Rotaready can be configured. I'm very keen to stress that every deployment we do of Rotaready is customized for the exact setup of your business. So many businesses might actually split their sites into separate rotas. If you're running a large restaurant, rather than having one rota for the entire site, you might have a front of house and a back of house rota. Or if you're running a hotel, you have many different departments, perhaps each with their own rota. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. If I log into the London site, why not? This will take me through to the second of our 2 platforms. And this will now really reflect how Rotaready or how things are looking in that particular site, London in this case. So at the top is your navigation shown in blue. This allows you to move around the product. It's all based on your permission level. So that will drive what you can do and what you can see. For example, can you build a rota? Can you see other people's pay rates? The whole thing is customizable. At the bottom right, you'll see this blue circle. And here's where you can come for help. So at any point, if you're stuck, we have 3 support channels. You can pick up the phone, you'll get straight through to us. You can drop us an email, or the most popular way these days is to use this blue circle. By clicking it, you can either search our knowledge base to find an answer for yourself, or you can go ahead and open a live chat query with us. As you can see, we're really responsive. We don't type that in. It's calculated automatically from the plugin which we use. So by using live chat, it means we know who you are, what company you're from, what page you're on, and we can help you really efficiently from there. Okay. I'm going to start off this demo in the staff section just to give some context. So if I choose staff at the top, this takes me into the staff or HR side of Rotaready. And here's where you'd see all your colleagues, dependent on the filters and columns you've applied towards the top. You can see some basic details for the colleagues in the London site in this particular example. I'm going to open up someone's profile, talk you through how the profile comes together, and then I'll talk you through how the integration with Eploy really makes new joiners a lot easier to manage. So if I click on Greg at the top, why not? This is the structure of Greg's account. I'll spend no more than 1 minute here. I'll start off with the personal tab, which has the basic personal records. Nothing here would really surprise you. A name, an email address, an actual address, phone number, and so on will all be on this page. The employment tab is where you'll see the history of the colleague's contractual details. So everything from join dates to leave dates to contracted hours per week, their site, their department, their staff group, their job role, that will all appear somewhere in this page. The pay tab will give you a history of that colleague's pay rates, either as salaries or as hourly pay rates themselves. This will drive, firstly, your payroll. Secondly, it will drive your cost control. So when you build a rota, and I'll show you one very shortly, Rotaready will tell you how much your future rota is going to cost you. So rather than waiting until after payroll has been done to see the commercial impact, you'll have forward visibility, which means no nasty surprises. And the numbers we populate will reflect the basic pay. By that, I mean the hourly pay rate or the salary. But we go further and we include employers' national insurance contributions, holiday smoothing, special pay rates or rules if perhaps you pay time and a half on a public holiday, pension contributions, and so on. So you get a full rolled up gross cost as to what the week is going to cost you, and indeed even the day. Your colleagues might have availability patterns, restricting them from working on particular days. In this case, Greg has a pattern that looks like he can't work at the weekend. You can see the colleague's attendance history. This will make more sense once I've shown you the attendance side in 10, 15 minutes or so. Documents as well. This is where you can store documents. There's no documents in Greg's example here, but the employment contract might be shown on this page. You can also choose to use our document signatures feature if you ever want to send a document for a colleague to electronically sign. Excuse me. The absence tab will give you a history of the colleague's absences, so holidays or sickness or anything in between, and also the holiday entitlement, in this case for Greg. In this example, he's been given a very simple looking 28 days upfront for the year. Alternatively, your colleagues might accrue holiday in line with the hours they work. And if that's the case, we have a great feature for that too, which proves really popular. The schedule tab is where everything comes together for Greg. This would show you his shifts. We've got a few here in green, any holidays, which I can't see any examples of in this particular case, but also any availability patterns. We saw a few minutes ago that he can't work on the weekend. As a result, Saturday and Sunday are blocked out. And to raise a request for absence, either Greg can do it by logging into his mobile app and raising that request, which will come through for management approval, or yourself as a manager can do it on a colleague's behalf simply by clicking on a day and following the steps. In the interest of time, I'm not going to bother you with that. But the way the integration with Eploy works, or the benefit of it, is if I wasn't using Eploy or I didn't have the integration turned on, whenever I had a new colleague, I would click this button towards the top right to add a new colleague. I'd fill out their details and go through the steps from there. But with the Eploy integration turned on, it means, like I said before, that when you click to hire the candidate on Eploy, their profile, as you can see here for Greg, will be created automatically, copying across pretty much all the details I've talked you through, from their personal records, their employment details, all the way through to a copy of the signed contract too. So it keeps everything in one place and saves you the faff of having to enter it or the risk of doing so incorrectly. I'll take you now onto the rotas side of things. This is the rota dashboard, which is very much the beating heart of Rotaready, and this tells you three things. At the top left, you can see how last week is looking. At the top right, you can see how this week is looking. And just beneath, you can see how ready you are for future upcoming weeks. Now, I'm going to start off down here. I'll talk you through how to get ready for a week, and then we'll circle back to look at the top left and top right, at which point they'll make a bit more sense. So this section, which I'm highlighting right now, This is what's called your weekly workflow. And it's the same process which each of your sites or each of your departments will follow every single week. It's a completely linear process. You can't go wrong. You just follow the steps. I'll talk you through what each circle or each step means, and then I can show you how I've got it in the position it currently is in. As you can see, I'm good to go for next week because I have a tick in every circle. So the first thing you'll do when approaching a week, in this case, the next week starts this coming Monday. Your business might start on a different day of the week other than Monday, and that's absolutely fine too. Rotaready can accommodate that. Step one would be to review out any outstanding absence requests. If a colleague has asked for holiday for next week, you should probably approve or reject before you go any further. Step two would then be to enter your sales forecast, so the sales you're expecting to make in your business. The third step will then be to build a draft rota. A draft rota is one which only managers can see and edit. And once you're happy for your rota to go live, your manager will mark it for approval, at which point somebody else in the business, maybe an operations director, an area manager, will come along, take a look at the rota, and if they're happy with the wage spend in line with the sales being forecasted, they would then publish that rota, which means it's live and everyone can see when they're working. So like I say, a really simple process. Follow those steps, you can't really go wrong. But let me now give you an example as to how I have each of these ticks put in place. I'll ignore the first step because it's not too exciting. So let me take you into the sales forecasting side of things. If I click here, this takes us into a crucial tool of ours called cost control. So welcome. Cost control tells you all around your commercial performance metrics. There's a few things happening on this page, so I'll try and talk you through it all. At the top, there's a section here called forecast. This is what you think is going to happen. And if I scroll down, you'll get to another section called actual, which is what has actually happened. And towards the bottom, there's a variance section, which shows you the difference between your forecast and your actual. If I scroll back towards the top, you might have noticed that both forecast, actual, and variance are broken down in the same way. You have the hours you're resourcing, the sales you're making, the wages you're spending, the wage percentage or the labor ratio which you're incurring, and then your productivity or sales per hour which you're achieving. These metrics can be further broken down into what we call streams. In this case, I have a very simple looking wet and dry. So if you run a restaurant, you'll be familiar with wet and dry, meaning sales of drink and sales of food. Your business might have completely different streams. You might have different streams for sales and wages. Everything there is customizable too. The reason I'm taking you in here is to show you how to add sales forecasts for next week, the first step towards getting your rota ready. So for next week, next Monday the 4th, and you can see the weather forecast here, by the way. This is based exactly where you are on Google Maps, and it will update every 4 hours. So if you find your business is somewhat dependent on the weather, you might choose to keep an eye on this and update your sales forecast or your rota as you get nearer to the time. So there's different ways of adding in your sales forecast. You can do so as simple as this, by choosing the relevant day and the relevant sales stream. In this case, I'm clicking here to edit my wet sales for Monday. I'm forecasting to make £250. Done, simple as that. You can type these numbers in as I've done so, in this case totaling just over £16,000 of forecast sales for next week. And this can be compared to any budgeted figures which might have been entered at the start of your financial year. In this case, I have a budget for this particular week of £16,000. It's gone green because my forecast exceeds my budget. A different feature you might choose to use, I mentioned it earlier on in fact, is where you might leverage Rotaready's machine learning to have your predicted sales pull through automatically. So if you have an Eploy integration enabled, Rotaready can analyze about 2 years or more, is the minimum worth of sales data, to pick up patterns and trends that the human eye typically wouldn't identify. And through that, Rotaready can produce a sales prediction for you. And the benefit of that particular prediction is that on average, that prediction is more than 20% more accurate than an operator's own forecast. And so if you work in a commercial role, you'll be very, very familiar with the fact that a more accurate sales forecast means you can be more accurate with the deployment of your labor, ultimately avoiding your overspend and your underspend. So our sales forecasts are in place. We're expecting to make just over £16,000 for the week. Before I leave cost control, I will very quickly point out, you can see some forecast hours and some forecast wages and other items beneath. This is because a rota has already been published. So at the moment when a rota is published or agreed, or it goes live, the numbers get snapshotted, they become your forecast. If I take you back to where we were, hopefully that explains why or how we have that second green tick in place here, indicating we've entered our sales forecast. What I'll now do is show you how a rota comes together. There are 3 ways of building a rota. What I'll show you today is the easiest to demonstrate, which is where you can build or edit a rota manually. You'll start off with a blank canvas and you can add shifts one by one, which is very easy to do. Alternatively, you might choose to copy a rota from week 1 to week 2. Alternatively, you might choose to generate a rota, which is where you can have a template or series of templates which define your staffing requirements for varying levels of demand. Click a button and Rotaready will match the staff you have to the shifts you need to fill to give you an accurate rota in a matter of seconds. But for today, let me show you how to edit manually a rota which I've already created. So if I click here, this will take me through to a rota which we've already built. Okay, here you go. So on the left-hand side of the page, you'll be able to see all your colleagues' names nested within their staff group. I'll let my screen catch up. Here we go. So on the left-hand side, everyone's names showing within different staff groups. In this particular case, we have management team and kitchen, front of house. Your terms might be completely different. You can see each colleague showing with how many hours they're scheduled to work this week. I should say next week. This is for Monday coming, the 4th of July. This number will change color if they're inside or outside of their contracted hours. So as it stands, we're scheduling to give Richard slightly more than he's contracted to. So it's gone green. We're meeting his contracted minimum hours. There's a row here for open shifts, which is where you can choose to place a shift if you haven't yet decided who's going to work it. You can reorganize your colleagues alphabetically or the date in which they joined Rotaready. You can search for a particular colleague to drill down the rota for one person. You can change the way the rota is viewed. There's a few different styles which will transpose the data on your screen. We're seeing a rota weekly here. Alternatively, you might choose to zoom out to see a month or to zoom in to see the detail of a day. You can change which week you're looking at by using the arrows left and right to roll backwards or forwards for a week, or click on the date itself to choose a different day as you see fit. These 2 buttons here I'll come back to in a few minutes' time. On the right-hand side, there's settings you can explore, there's tools you can make use out of. You can look at a different site's rota without having to leave the page. It's all very easy to do. The key thing to note here is this rota has been published, so it's live and visible for all colleagues. Once upon a time, it would have started out as a draft before being marked for approval, before then being published. I've skipped those steps just in the interest of time today. So the main part of the page is obviously the rota, and this shows you each shift that each colleague is working on each day. For example, on Monday, Richard is scheduled to work a management shift from 12 until 10. To create a shift, it's as simple as this. Click into a gap, and you can firstly choose your shift type. Perhaps I'll choose bar, why not? The list is customizable to you. I can choose the times, I'll say from 3 until 11, why not? If I choose to save, that creates a shift, simple as that. You can click on a shift to delete it. You can right click to copy and right click to paste, which I'll show you in a moment. One thing I'm keen to quickly show you though, is that when you go to add a shift in, you might have noticed these 3 little buttons at the top. These are Rotaready's machine learning driven shift recommendations. The 3 most common shifts which Diana happens to work. So if you came in here to give Diana a management shift from 11:30 to 11 o'clock, which is one of the most common shifts which she works, you can fill out the box beneath or just click there instead and click save. It's one of the many ways in which we can save you a heap of time. Everything's drag and drop. If I drag the shift away from Diana on Monday and give it to, let's say, Richard on Wednesday, you'll see how that updates. But every single time that you create a shift or delete a shift or change who it's for or change its time, Rotaready will check if that's going to cause any problems. In this example, Rotaready's given me a heads up to say, hey, watch out. By giving Richard this shift, it means that he's going to have less than his 2 days off per week, which seems a bit of a mean thing to do. So I'll take Rotaready's advice and cancel that change. You can also copy and paste, like I mentioned before, right click to copy and right click to paste. That will go through, again, subject to any validation, as I've just triggered there as well. From time to time, you might share staff between your sites. And to give you an example, I'll pick on Anne at the bottom here. If I choose to create a shift, go into more shift options, there's plenty of stuff I can explore here. One of the most common things to go into this side of Rotaready for is to send a colleague to work elsewhere. So maybe a contrived example, but if I send this is Anne to work over in Birmingham rather than London on Monday, I can choose a different site. And through this tick box, it means the hours and the wages of Anne's labour will follow her to Birmingham's cost control rather than hitting our cost control here in London. If I were to choose a shift type, I'll leave it as 9 to 5. A break can be applied automatically from your company policy, by the way, keeping everything accurate from your timesheeting to your payroll, to your cost control, to your holiday accrual. And if I click to save, that will create the shift. As you can see, it's a shift over in Birmingham, which means our colleagues in Birmingham will see and magically pop up on their rota too. I'll open up the hours and wages button now. This will tell you some hours and wage information. So on the right-hand side of each person's name, you can see the cost that that person is incurring. And towards the very bottom of the page, you can see your total numbers. So in total for this week, which hasn't started yet, don't forget, we can see we're going to be using 335.34 hours, the daily breakdown of which is shown to the right-hand side. Our sales forecast, which we entered into cost control a few minutes ago, is pulling through here. Our wages are forecasting to be just shy of £4,000 for the week. And like I mentioned before, that number will reflect people's basic pay rates, so their hourly pay rate or their salary, but also including employers' national insurance contributions, holiday smoothing, special pay rates or rules if you pay time and a half on a public holiday, and pension contributions too. So overall for the week, we're forecasting to be at just short of 25% labour ratio, or wage percentage, you might call it. I'll close that view for the moment. I'll open up this one, the staffing profile, which also proves really popular. This gives you a visual representation of your rota beneath. So if I position my mouse anywhere over here, so I've landed at 3:15 p.m. on Friday, the purple line you can see for each day tells you how many colleagues you have working at any moment. So in this case, we're going to have 7 colleagues working. That's helpful to know in its own right, but a really powerful thing here you can do is overlay your demand. In this case, for a hotelier, in fact, this is a restaurant, forgive me, the most important measure of demand will be the reservations booked in to the restaurant. And by integrating with the reservation system, we can display that information to you. So we can see over here a few other lines, a green line indicating the total number of guests, total number of covers, and then in the darker color, black in this case, is telling you the number of tables booked as well. So you can use this to visually cross-reference your staffing profile with your demand profile too. Your business might have a completely different metric which you want to overlay, and that's absolutely fine as well. Okay, if I take you back to the Rota dashboard, that will hopefully explain how our preparedness, all the ticks came into be. So what I'm now going to show you is what happens when the week actually starts. Everything I've talked through so far is what happens before the week begins. So if we fast forward our minds now to that Monday morning, the very first thing that will happen is your colleagues will come to clock in and clock out. And the results of them doing so, you can see on your attendance tab over here towards the top. This shows me today's attendance records. To give you a nicer example, I'll roll back to yesterday, which is obviously complete. So this tells you the scheduled times side by side with the times that each colleague actually clocked in. So for example, Ruby at the top here was scheduled to work a shift from 11 until 8 p.m. She actually clocked in 5 minutes early, and she left, in this case, about 1 hour and 12 minutes late. The cool thing here that Rotaready is doing is showing these data side by side, meaning we know which shift each colleague is turning up for. And by account, we can then figure out if each colleague is early or late, and we can therefore treat it properly for your payroll. So as a simple example, if I draw your attention to, let's go with Richard towards the bottom here. He was scheduled to work from 12 until 10. He clocked in 8 minutes early. Now your company will have its own policy, and we load that policy into Rotaready. As a simple example here, you can see the results of the policy on the right-hand side. And this policy I can tell is saying that if the colleague clocks in early, which Richard has in this case, he clocked in 8 minutes early, they'll be reflected as payable automatically from the time they were scheduled to start. Conversely, if the colleague is late, like Alice was in the example above, she was scheduled to start at 11:45. She clocked in 7 minutes late at 11:52. In that example, she would be considered payable from 11:52, the moment that she clocked in. So the point I'm trying to make is that Rotaready can apply your policy automatically, which saves a huge amount of time. It gives you the compliance bonus as well. And also there's a lot of cost saving for making sure you're not paying the hours which are unproductive too. Now, things will go wrong. People are human beings, not robots. They will forget to clock in. They will forget to clock out. That's completely natural. One of the benefits of Rotaready is that we have a great feature that helps you pick out if anything has gone wrong. So rather than sifting through every single day to pick out where something might have been missed, instead you can rely on our attendance issues feature, which you'll get alerted to at the notification bell towards the top right. So this notification will tell us if there's any attendance issues, so problems that have been detected. So these items, these exceptions are flagged to you rather than you having to go and find them. So we have two exceptions here for different reasons. The first one is for our colleague Ruby, who yesterday has what is called a late clock out. So she was scheduled to work, as we saw a few minutes ago, from 11 until 8 p.m. She clocked in 5 minutes early, okay, but she clocks out an hour and 12 minutes late. Now, if a colleague clocks out 2 minutes late, we're not going to bother you. You can choose the threshold at which you're invited to approve or reject, or certainly review this overtime. So that threshold is normally set to somewhere around 15 minutes, half an hour in most customers' cases. In this example, she's clocked out an hour and 12 minutes late, which is quite a lot. So you're invited to resolve this, basically review the overtime. So you can either choose to approve Ruby's overtime. If, yes, she was productive, I asked her to stay late, we were busy, and she cracked on throughout that time. Alternatively, you might reject that overtime. If actually Ruby finished on time, but before she clocked out, she had a beer in the bar, she called her mum, and eventually she came back and clocked out, that would be a good reason to reject that overtime. In this case, let's say that I want to approve her overtime. I click to do so, and that will clear the issue. The other example we have here is for Richard. In fact, today he has a management shift starting at 9:30, but he's not setting a great example here as a manager, because the issue is he hasn't yet clocked in, because it's now 11:30, so 2 hours late, and he's not clocked in. So what's happened here? You can click to resolve this, and the example in this case is to either clock him in manually, because maybe he simply forgot. Alternatively, you might choose to mark him as absent if perhaps he is sick on the day. I'll clock him in manually, but he was 5 minutes early. There you go, and that updates too. So everything runs automatically from that point. So during your week, your colleagues are clocking in and clocking out. You're resolving any attendance issues which get triggered. Also during your week, you'll keep keeping an eye on your cost control. So if I take you back into this tool, and you saw it before, this is now the second time you're looking at it. The difference this time is we're looking at the week we're currently in. Last time you saw this tool, we looked at next week instead. So today is Tuesday the 28th. The forecast numbers are what I showed you earlier on, the numbers which are captured at the point of publishing the rota. If I were to scroll down, you'll see what metrics you've actually incurred. So if I scroll back to give you an example, we forecast to make £750 of sales on the Monday. In reality, we made slightly more, 786. So by integrating with your till system, that data can pull through automatically. And if you don't have the integration turned on, you can type it in. It's really simple. But it's not just your sales which will pull through. It's also the hours. Look at this. We actually ended up using 28.12 hours of labor, when in actual fact, we had forecast to use 27.25. So we've used fractionally more. You don't have to do any calculations. You don't type anything in. It's crunched automatically from the scheduled durations, the actual durations, all put through your sanitization policy to identify the times that people should be paid for. Likewise, your wages, we forecast to spend £387. In reality, we spent fractionally less, and our wage percentage is therefore a little bit better than what it was forecast to be. The point I'm making here is that Rotaready will automate all of these metrics. The only thing you have to do is to keep an eye on your attendance issues. So if someone hasn't clocked in, resolve it. Everything else downstream will then run automatically and smoothly for you. Let me take you back now to where we started on the dashboard, and hopefully now this whole page will make more sense. We can see for last week, we have no attendance issues. And that's also the case for this week. Well, we did until a few minutes ago, we had two, and we resolved them both. For both last week and this week, all of our sales figures have pulled through, as we'd certainly expect them to do. The last thing to do is to sign off last week. Sign off is what you do at the end of the week, and it's your way of confirming to payroll, yep, all my data is good to go. So by clicking sign off, it takes you into cost control for the third time. And this time, though, we're looking at last week instead. The structure is the same. We just happen to have rewound 1 week further. So because this week is in the past, we're able, in this case, to sign it off, this nice inviting blue button at the top right. By clicking this, I can click to sign off my week, which is me saying, yep, everything's good to go. Get a nice satisfying burst of confetti, and this means your data is locked down. So when it comes to reporting, everything is stable. No one can change the rota. No one can change the attendance. The sales are locked, the wages are locked. Everything is fixed for reporting and payroll too. So that's pretty much it. There's probably 2 or 3 minutes, so I'll quickly touch upon a few other features. We do have a trunk feature. I'm not going to go into it in any detail today. Trunk is the way that tips are distributed amongst your staff. So if you're running a restaurant, hopefully you'll be receiving a healthy number of tips. You might be using a points-based or hours-based or rate-based trunk scheme. Rotaready can support all three. to automate the way and make it easier to distribute the tips amongst your staff. We also have a messaging feature as well. I won't go into it today, but you can imagine it as kind of like WhatsApp within Rotaready. I will show you a few reports though. I'll show you 3. Firstly, I'll show you the Rota progress report. And this allows you to see for next week and beyond how you're looking across the whole business. In this example, I've only got one Rota published for one of my sites, London in this case. The other ones I don't have any dummy data for, but you can imagine how it would look if each of the sites had built their Rota and have a full group-wide view of your forecast commercial performance, looking forward to next week and beyond. You might choose to use our sign-off progress report, which looks back at a previous week, again, across all sites. In this case, we can see for London itself, the forecast versus actual values for the following metrics: wages, sales, wage percentage, and hours, all aggregated across the group. So across the whole business, you can see where you ended up compared to where you forecast to be. And the last thing I'll show you, because it's only fair to do so, is a payroll export. This is basically the data which you'll use to push into your payroll. So if I open this up, this is basically a timesheet. Rotaready will automatically prepare this. You can see how quick it was to build. It will tell you how many hours each colleague should be paid for, in which site, at which pay rate, at which pay element, all along with any paid absence as well. So any holidays or sickness or anything in between would also be shown on this page. So that's about as much as I was planning to share. Hopefully I've kept for 25 minutes or so, but I'll probably hand back to Bruce now and yeah, pick up any questions which might have come through.
Hi, Jamie. Thanks a lot for that. Yeah, I've got a couple of questions here. So can you tell us how you handle training employees who are going to be using the tool?
Yeah, good question. So we include one training session per each implementation. So the training session is done live with your very own customer success manager. And we also have a whole heap of resources too. So whenever you log into Rotaready for the first time, we throw product tours at you. So the screen will fade in a few select areas and pick out a few really important bits just to further reinforce the learnings which you'll have been taught during the training itself.
Great. And how do you handle sort of support and looking after customers once they've gone live?
Good question. So we have 3 support channels. You can pick up the phone, you can drop us an email, or you can use live chat, which I briefly showed at the start of the demo. And you might have seen those stats. On average, we respond to a written inquiry, so a live chat or an email, within 3 minutes. On average, we close a support query, or we answer it within 30 minutes. Also, you can access our knowledge base if you want to find an answer for yourself. And we also have a lot of recordings too. We do webinars ourselves, much like this one. We do on a monthly basis. We call them spotlight sessions, and we focus on a particular part of Rotaready. So if your question happens to pertain to a more complex or detailed part of Rotaready, you can watch a video. They typically range between 5 to 15 minutes, and you get a deep dive into how that site comes together.
Okay, great. Let me just check. I don't think we've got any further questions. So I guess that's really just to leave it with you as to what people should do next.
Great, thanks, Bruce. Yeah, well, hopefully that was a helpful demo to see what Rotaready is all about and the benefits it brings, and of course the integration with Eploy itself. If you would like more information, or you'd like to arrange a demo to go through what I've shown you today in a bit more detail and a bit more time, then please do get in touch. You can pick up the phone, give us an email, or check out more information on the website. And we very much hope to hear from you.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Jamie, for your time this morning. I've certainly found it really useful, get a good overview of what you've done, and particularly what you've done with the integration with Eploy, which is fantastic to see. Just to let everyone know that we have recorded today's webinar. Recognise that as we at Eploy tend to deal with talent acquisition teams, and staff rotating often falls to other teams within your organisation. We have recorded it. We'll be sending a link round. So if you'd like to share the recording with any of your colleagues within your organisation, please feel free to do so. So, yep, just to wrap up and say thanks again, Jamie. It's been really informative, and we look forward to seeing you all on the next Eploy partner webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce.